Welcome to the Therapist Uncut podcast, where off-the-clock therapists who happen to be friends share their uncensored thoughts about real life. Join us weekly in spreading positivity and making mental health relatable through casual conversation, inspirational stories, and real talk with friends who happen to be therapists. Please welcome your co-hosts, Nikki Young and Alyssa Nahara.
Therapist Uncut, welcome back for another episode. Myself, Nikki Young, here with my fabulous co-host, Alyssa Nahara. And we are super stoked today because we have, I'm going to just call you Officer Mitch. Does that work?
That'll work.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yep.
Officer Mitch, we're stoked. He's actually going to join us for a couple episodes. I'm going to let you introduce yourself. Actually, we're going to start off with a question. How did you get interested in law enforcement in the first place?
Thanks for having me, first of all. I grew up in South Florida. Never had any idea of what I wanted to. In fact, I thought I was going to be a Major League Baseball player, right?
Uh-huh.
Played sports, had a little bit of a tough growing up. My dad, alcoholic, back in the 80s, kind of cocaine took over South Florida. Mm-hmm. He got addicted. He was abusive to my mom. So my outlet was sports. It was my junior year where, I don't know, things were changing a little bit, and military kind of came in as a potential possibility when I graduated. My grandfather was a Marine. My uncle was a Marine. So I remember literally I graduate high school, not sure what I'm going to do. I'd taken the ASVAB for the military. I decided I want to go try to walk on at a junior college. So played junior college summer ball. I'll never forget this. If you've ever been to Florida, it's super hot.
It's so humid.
Sweaty.
I've never been there. Maybe one day.
So hot.
It's like 6 showers a day kind of thing.
So literally just taking batting practice, and a ball gets hit over my head. I go to pick it up, and I remember looking, sweat's just dripping. I look at the ball, and I'm like, I don't want to play anymore. I mean, literally just look at it. So that day, leave practice, drive right to the recruiter's office. And I walk in, and it's one of the ones that had the Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marines all in one building. So I walk in, and the only person there at the time was the Navy recruiter. And so I go talk to him, and they give me their little sales pitch, and I'm not feeling it. There was nothing about it that was exciting for the Navy. And then so I go to walk out, and I pass by the Marine Corps office, and there was this kid I grew up with named Sunshine. I don't even know his real name. But Sunshine is sitting in the office, and I hear my name called. Hey, Mitch. And I look in there. I'm like, what are you doing? He's like, what are you doing? I said, I'm done. Like, I don't know. I'm like, I want to do something else. That the interest of the recruiter looked over and called me in, showed me this little hoorah video, and then I was like, all right, sign me up.
Dang.
So I was only 17 at that moment.
Okay.
I hadn't turned 18, so I had to call my mom. And I said, hey, can you come down to the recruiter's office? And she was like, for what? And I'm like, I want to go to the military. So
did she see this coming at all?
She kind of had an idea that I was going to happen. So that was in July. They asked me when I wanted to leave. I said, well, I want my summer. So September 11th of 92, I go to boot camp, go to Parris Island, combat training in Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, school in 29 Palms, and ultimately stationed at Pendleton, which brought me to California.
Okay.
When I got out, I worked in the private sector. I was a communications. I did like telephone systems and that kind of stuff when I was in the military. So I'm like, what am I going to do? And then I ended up working for a security company as far as installing surveillance systems and that. But something was missing. And
at this point, about how old are you?
So 18, 23, 24. So I was 25.
So to all the 18, 23, 24-year-olds out there, if you still don't know what you're doing in life, it's okay.
Perfect. Yeah. I had no clue what I was doing. Yeah. So ultimately, I see an ad in the paper for the sheriff's office, and I'm like, well, that's kind of like the military. My oldest daughter was already born, so I knew I wasn't going back into the military. But I'm like, this can be. So I had no law enforcement background. I had no criminal justice degree, basically a high school diploma in the military. Ended up testing for a local sheriff's office, got hired, ended up quitting my job. But I found out 2 weeks before the academy started, they cut the budget. So I ended up having to put myself through the academy. I bartended at night, and then ultimately got hired in Tuolumne County and worked there for 11 years. So I ended up loving it, not knowing any idea of what I was doing. No clue, like no background. Like I saw the police, take my dad away. You know what I mean? Yeah. So, and it was something honestly, like in law enforcement, I didn't think I was had the capabilities to do it, right? It's very, very difficult to do and what the responsibilities are, but it was the closest thing to the military I could find without going back into the military. So that's how ultimately, like I said, I wasn't one of those kids that grew up, wanting to be in law enforcement. I just kind of fell on it and it kind of molded me into where I went. So that was it.
Well, that's an interesting mindset shift to go from, you mentioned as a kid watching law enforcement take that away. Yeah. And then I think that ties into what our first episode with you is going to be really focused on in your role in youth life as an SRO. So how long ago did you? So
I worked 11 years Colony County on patrol. I worked crimes against children as a detective.
And that's how we met.
Former social worker, for those of you that haven't listened and all.
Yeah, a lot of praise for what you guys did with Child Protective Services. It's a very difficult field. Ultimately, I went, let's put it all out there, but I did go through a divorce, wanted a kind of a fresh start. I loved working at that county, but the pay wasn't great. So I kind of looked for a Bay Area community. And then ultimately, I had a pretty good resume. So I put my application in Brentwood, and then also in Livermore, and Brentwood was able to hire me first. Worked for patrol for a very, very short amount of time. Like I said, I was going through that divorce. So also there was child custody things, and I was the new man at the department. So I was working basically graveyard weekends. And there was an opportunity for an announcement for the school resource officer position. And something in the back of my mind, I always kind of wanted to get involved with that. But I didn't qualify because the part of it was I qualified for the number of years as a law enforcement officer, but I was still on probation at the department. Yeah. So part of the announcement, they said, hey, we switched the schedule from 5/8 to 4/10 schedule. And so I responded to the lieutenant just to let him know. I said, hey, it's cool that you changed the schedule. What about changing that clause with probation?
Way to advocate for what you want.
But I did. But I just wanted him to know that I was interested, right? So he came back to me and said, hey, look, I appreciate but you have to wait your turn. I said, no problem. I'm just letting you know I'm interested. So I don't know, it was 30, 45 days later. And I'm literally getting work on a tattoo in a tattoo shop. And he calls me and he goes, hey, can you come to work? And I'm like, yeah.
Tell your boss no.
But I'm like, yeah, but it's going to give me a few, right? Yeah. He goes, no, I'm just kidding. He goes, tell me why you want to be a school resource officer. And we had a quick conversation. He said, come see me on Monday. And I walk into the office. He said, hey, no one else put in for it. So you're the only one. So I kind of take it as like a kind of a little bit of fate that it happened. I only got three things he gave me direction on. He said, don't mess up the time card. Don't have the school call us. And you treat that campus like you're the chief of police. I mean, there's no
that's a good
book on how to do that job. So I got on campus and things started from there.
Spoiler alert. If Mitch looks at all familiar to any of you,
it's because he's famous.
I had actually, and I don't know if you know this, Alyssa had initially sent me this video. So spoiler alert, he absolutely killed it in this position and earned so much respect and love from the students that they went out of their way to celebrate Mitch. And I had actually seen the video that was put together about you. I don't know. I come across my social media, no connection, just somebody shared it as this awesome feel-good video. And so when Alyssa sent it to me, I said, I've seen that before. I remember that.
And we will make sure to link it in the show notes. So make sure you go to therapistuncut.com for today's show notes. And you will be linked to, it was the Be Kind episode, right?
Dude be nice.
Dude be nice.
Yeah, dude be nice. Yeah.
Very cool. So for those of us who don't know what SRO is, or maybe didn't even know that law enforcement can have a presence on campus, talk to us a little bit about what that looks like.
Like I said, there's no book, there's no path on what to do. The campus that I was on was anywhere fluctuated between 2,700 to 2,900 students. And I remember pulling up the first day and stepping onto this campus and all these kids running everywhere. And I learned that very first day that there's a principal, a vice principal, or 4 vice principals, 4 counselors, a marriage and family therapist, and a psychologist all on campus for the students. And now they're bringing an SRO.
And just to clarify, this was a high school.
High school, yeah. And I was like amazed, like going back when I grew up, I'm like, we didn't have all that, or at least I don't remember having all that. But the way things are now is all these support for the students. And I really took the title, the resource part of it, to heart, and as a resource to the students, to the staff, to the parents. And that's what I kind of built on. And I remember standing there and looking out on this campus, and I'm like, man, what am I going to do? And I knew I had to get involved, but I didn't know where. Like I would stand out at lunch and kids would kind of come by. But ultimately, the culture of campus is driven by the leadership program or the activities on campus. So that's where I kind of put my efforts at in the beginning. And, when I first walked in the classroom, it was like, oh my God, who's in trouble, right? And then ultimately, as I started building relationships and little things like this, like a kid's coming late to class. Hey, you late? He's like, yeah. All right, let me walk you in. I'll take the blame while you're late, right? And I'd walk him in and just be like, hey, it's my fault that he's late. And then that kid started seeing those kinds of things. So then it became where I would walk into a classroom and they wouldn't even do anything other than like give me a handshake or whatever. But it wouldn't be, oh, who's in trouble?
Punitive.
It became the norm of me being on campus. And as the relationships were being built, it made my job even easier. Like, because they trust me enough. And then there was a mutual respect between the two. And, so it took time. I'm not saying like this happened immediately, but
it wasn't overnight.
it took time, being seen, a lot of hours, like, going to not only the football games, but going to a theater performance or a band performance. So like I was spread thin, but I wanted to touch each part of the campus, because that way, that's where the true relationships are built. So
what did you learn about the power of relationships and working with youth as a school resource officer?
So what I learned is that everyone has a story, right? Everyone has a different background. And I think what I wasn't afraid to do is I wasn't afraid to share my story. And when I did that, then it made me seem, okay, he's human, right? He's gone through struggles. And I did presentations for incoming freshmen as my years kind of grew. And that's what I said, like, you never know what the person next to you is dealing with. So how are you going to be so judging? So as the relationships built, I also learned a lot about these students, and somebody who I may have thought, man, this is just not a good student, where ultimately this person is great, just that he has the ability to make it here based on everything that he's living with at his home life. So, and it just changed my perspective overall. And what I tell a lot of people, and maybe we'll get into this later, but, all these law enforcement agencies are trying everything they can to build the relationship within the community, right? Nobody wants another George Floyd, or nobody wants any of a Ferguson event, right? So all these law enforcement agencies are doing, social media, showing that the human side of things. They're doing, coffee with a cop. They're doing all these different things.
They're coming on podcasts and talk about how they're human too.
Absolutely, yeah. But really, like, when you talk about coffee with a cop, who goes there? The people that want to talk to law enforcement, right? But how do you reach the other parts of the community that maybe is just a little standoffish or don't really care for authority and that kind of stuff? So what I tell people is, you want to build relationships with your community, it starts with the youth. And what I tried, and I've had the honor of, speaking at conferences, and I would tell school administration and, law enforcement administration that if you don't value the SRO, then you're doing a disservice for your community, because you build a relationship inside that school. Now that student goes out into the world, maybe he's contacted on a traffic stop. How different is that traffic stop now that, hey, I have a relationship with Officer Mitch and what we've done on this campus? So it completely can change the culture of everything. There's calls I even go to now where I see students that, that I had the ability to know, and that whole, I'm a safe person that they see. So
how different are those interactions from showing up on a call where you don't have that history?
Oh, wait, big time.
Right?
Yeah, big time different. Like, you're just another, person. And, especially on the patrol side of things, a lot of times we go to everybody's worst day, right? Whether it's, a traffic collision, whether it's, a spouse being arrested for domestic violence, whatever the reason, a death in the family, like we go to everyone's worst day. And, I had one recently where it was a male in his 49 years old, who was found down inside the garage, right? Medical issue, ended up passing away. But it was his daughter that was a special needs, but I knew her, and her mom immediately, as soon as I get there, was like, hey, it was so comforting to see you there, and that's all the relationship that started in the school.
On the school campus.
Yeah, in the school campus. So pretty neat to,
And I wonder, too, how different this is in comparison to the myths or the assumptions that we might make if we're not familiar with what an SRO is when we hear about it. So for you, what are some myths that maybe you've heard about having a resource officer on campus?
You talk about judgments. What have you run into in terms of assumptions about your role?
Oh, the 100% that cops are robotic, right? That we're just robotic, that we're not. We're human beings just like everyone else. So, and the fact that I wear a uniform doesn't mean I have the same beliefs or am I the same way of other law enforcement officers that maybe haven't done the right thing, right? That assumption of, I like to be liked, right? I do. And sometimes just because I wear that uniform, they might think of you as something else. And I had to bridge some gaps with some students who, they had a complete dislike for law enforcement, and it took time. And maybe that time took, hey, you can always get to a kid's heart by food or candy, right? Those are things. So I made sure that, I would carry candy or carry food, you know what I mean? And then the kind of cool thing is you start building relationships, and then now the students become your advocate, and then they do it. So probably the biggest thing is just the whole, we're not robotic. And when I go back to telling you that I had the ability to talk to administrators and law enforcement, you can't put the new police officer inside of a school, right? You're doing a disservice to him. He already went through the academy. He wants to go out there. He wants to arrest bad guys, right? Plus, he's straight out of the academy. So he is going to be robotic. Everyone's going to be a threat to him, all that kind of stuff. And you can't put the old guy who's getting ready to retire and is going to hide out in the office and not be seen. You have to find the person that is going to make a difference on that campus.
It has to be the right fit.
It does, 100%.
And someone who enjoys being around teenagers if you're at high school.
They are, and they're rough.
If that is not your crowd, you probably shouldn't be on campus.
You have to have the ability to make fun of yourself, to let your guard down so they can see that, and then you have to be someone that they can come and ask questions to. And then what they want honesty. They don't want you to sugarcoat it. They want truthfully. If they have a question, let's talk about it. Like, I was there when some of these issues in law enforcement were going out, and some of the African American students on campus wanted to ask questions. And hey, it's free for all. You guys ask. I would even go in classrooms and take my uniform shirt off and just say, let's talk just as people.
And how cool the symbolism of that.
Yeah.
Right? The human behind the badge.
It is. And that's the thing, is like, let's just have a conversation, because there's so many things that happen, perceptions and all this other, let's just talk about it. And maybe this thing that's just eating you up inside of you, if we just have a conversation about it, then let's change. And then it maybe gives me a different perspective of what you're going through. And maybe you did have a horrible interaction with law enforcement. But I'm not that guy. Let's talk about it and see how that thing could have been different. So
I'm trying to contain excitement right now, and I don't know if y'all can see it on camera, but I'm stoked to hear let's talk about it, because that's why we do this podcast, right? We want to be able to have conversations that people wouldn't normally have, and that's why we have Officer Mitch here today, so we could talk about the power of relationships in real time and what it could look like. And what Officer Mitch is describing, he's describing the investment that he put in building these relationships with our youth. They're now resulting in safe places to have hard conversations. And that is just so, so exciting. Yeah. And I know you're not in that role anymore, but for the, 6 years that you were in it, that's just so impactful for you and all the other officers that are on campus. So,
and from what I'm hearing from you too, it's not let's sit down and I'm going to talk at you, right? Because how many adults do that to kids?
100%.
Let me tell you why all cops are not the same, or let me tell you why this and that. But everything I hear from you is like, let me learn from you.
Yeah.
Why do you have the perspective you have? Let's get to know each other. Let's build relationships, and let's learn from each other, and potentially even change each other's minds on certain things. And because how many adults can walk, especially somebody who's used to being in authority, whether it be a principal or an SRO, right?
And I would imagine our listeners right now who also work with youth are like, yeah, what he said, because it's so powerful. If you've ever worked with the youth, this is such great work. I think I cut you off. Where were we even going with this conversation?
Know, but we were excited.
We were talking about assumptions that you were facing, relationships that you had to build. What other barriers came up in your role?
Social media was a big thing. Right, it was a huge problem on campus. And there was a lot of times where I was handling things that weren't even, let's say, law enforcement related, right?
We're talking like online bullying,
stuff like that, or just even drama. Like I had to learn that you can have 5 girls in a photo, and if one girl's not tagged in that photo, then that's like a shot at that girl, right? So I was trying to figure out a way to bring the campus more together as a group. And because the culture, when it's driven and the culture is good, then it just has a different feel, right? Like you can feel it in the air. And I didn't know this, but one of the ways it kind of happened without even knowing, or not purposely, any kind of strategic way behind it. Daily, I would walk to different parts of the school, right? For a lot of different reasons. I wanted to, get the feel of that day. Was there anything brewing? Those kinds of things. So part of my little routine was I would walk into the special needs class. And even if I'm having a bad day, that was the place I went, because these kids who have all these disabilities, they're the happiest kids there. And if I was having a rough day or whatever it was, I'd go in there and they'd make me feel better, right? And, we little handshakes and stickers and all this kind of stuff. So one day I'm walking on my way there, and there was a girl that came up, "Hey, Officer Mitch, can I talk to you?" And I said, "Absolutely." So she goes, she's all sad, almost tears in her eyes. And she starts telling me about some drama on social media. And in the big picture of things, it's no big deal at all, right? Like, as she's telling me this, I'm like, come on, keep walking with me. Ultimately, we walk into the classroom. I know it's a big deal to her right now, but into the grand scheme of things it was. But I'm listening to her. So we walk in. I don't say anything. I go into the special needs class, handshakes, hugs, pass out stickers. They always have food in there, so I always went in there. Grabbed a little bit of a food, and then you walk one in door, come all the way through, walk out the other door. And when we walked out that other door, she said, "Maybe this isn't that big of an issue." And that's when a light went off for me of, okay, how do I get more of the general ed students or the general students with the students with special needs? And put together a committee, but I had an idea of, I wanted to do a special needs prom. And then as I started building this committee and talking to people, I didn't want it to, there was 3 high schools in our district. I didn't want to just make it the high school that I was at. I wanted to make it all 3 high schools. But then as I began to start planning all this and working on this, I saw how much the parents went through. So now I wanted it to make it to where, what can I do then allow the parents to also be close, but have their own time to do their own thing. So I came up with an idea of where I was going to hold this venue. We can hold a concert in the park. And then as it continued to grow, and we continued to talk as a committee, I'm like, well, I want to do the whole community. So we decided to come up with a parade. So it was a whole day of an event. And then what it caused was nothing was going to be paid for by the parents. Everything was going to be covered. So tuxedos for the boys, dresses we did dress drives. We had hair and makeup donated. General ed students did the hair and makeup for the kids with special needs. I got barbershop in town, a couple of them to participate. So now what it's done is, you've taken this one little event.
Yeah, you're talking about bringing
I can hear the deep breath from Nick over here.
Right? You're talking about bringing just the different grades and classes together, but you just went ahead and brought the whole damn town together.
The power of community. Yeah. Like, there really is power in that.
And I had no idea what it was going. I knew that I wasn't afraid to fail, but I knew, like, I didn't have any funding. Like, we would have to go out and raise it and do all these things, but the community came together, and it turned into this beautiful event where, all the kids from 3 different high schools showed up at one school, and then we shuttled them to dinner, and then the leadership. So
you got local restaurants on board too?
Well, absolutely. Yeah. The leadership kids were from each high school responsible for decorating different parts of the event. Some were for the parade, some were for the dinner, some were for the dance. And then they go to have this dinner. Then we pulled downtown, and we had the leadership kids from the middle schools now involved too. They got points, or part of their grade was to get people down. And so then we have this parade come through downtown, and then ultimately end up at this red carpet entrance, and the kids go into this area for the dance, and the parents go out into the concert in the park. So,
and what was this event called again?
So we called it the True Hero Prom, because to me, they're the ones dealing with all that stuff, and they were able to, still come to school, and they were the ones that were happy. So they were true heroes to me, and that's where the whole idea kind of came from. So, and
every parent listening right now is trying to figure out how to get an Officer Mitch on their campus.
Every parent, every leader in the community, every administration. This is what we're here to do, is spread kindness. So if our listeners took just one thing from our episode with you today, because we touched on so many things about having a school resource officer, what would you want that one thing to be?
Probably the one thing I would say is, don't be afraid to reach out to that school resource officers. They're going to know the climate of the culture on campus, what's going on. They're going to be the ones that are going to give you an honest, be transparent when it comes to things. They're the ones, if something does happen and you need assistance in any kind of way, to reach out to them. And then they can almost be, I'm not saying that they're going to take the place as a parent, but they can almost be a branch to that tree to help. It takes a village to raise a kid, especially nowadays. And that school resource officer, if they are part of that village, could be the little bit of a branch to that tree, is reach out to them. That's what they're there for. Then, they want to help. They want to make that campus daily, feel like a place where the student can come and be there, and, there was I think at first when I walked onto the campus and some of the things I was doing, I think even the teachers were like, who is this guy? But for whatever reason, in the back of my mind, there was a method to my madness, and my department didn't handcuff me, and the school allowed me a little bit of freedom, a little bit of leash. And ultimately, like I said, as I kind of navigated my way through this position with no real guidance, just kind of a feel, it ultimately ended up working out for me. Like I said, I stopped so many things from happening before just because kids I would have my work cell phone number, they could have it. Like, I got texts, I never put their names in it because I had no idea who it was, but I'd be like, all right, who is this? And then, hey, I heard this is going to happen, or this person's having a bad day, or whatever the reason is. So like I said, the whole idea of a school resource officer being a true resource that extends to the parents, to the students, to all administration. So as parents, I would just say, if you're lucky enough to have a school resource officer on your campus, to make sure you get to know that person, make sure that, there's somebody that you can utilize if need be.
I have a hard question. I'm sorry. I know I asked you to do one final thought, but if somebody were interested.
Oh, that's what I was going to say. Yeah.
And Nick's going to finish the sentence. Go.
You started from the ground and you created this, right? You had the perception to be able to go in and see what was needed for those who maybe have questions on what to do on their own campuses. Is this where you were going with this? Are you open to contact and people learning from you?
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, I've been lucky enough to speak at conferences. There's a annual conference in Anaheim, the School Safety Conference, which is a mixture of law enforcement and school administrator or educators, which is I highly recommend for every SRO to attend, because now you're social networking, you're networking with people, and you're talking about things, and you'll see how, man, if we work together on this event, there's a lot of times where ego gets in the way of things. On a campus, it can't. And I'm 100% open to it. Like even to this day, like one of, there's an officer that's going to take this role in October. And I work with him directly. Like I said, if you can make the community better, it's going to start with the youth. So I'm completely 100% open to.
How do people get in contact with you?
We can put all my information on the podcast. I have no problem with that at all. Email, cell phone number, it doesn't matter. So.
All right, we're going to link it up. And I'm just sitting here thinking about a parallel, right? Love Our Cities was a local, I believe it started locally, and now it's spread nationally. And so how cool would it be for you to take what you've done and just slowly watch it? And I'm sure it already has, but just watch it start to trickle outward and people take your model essentially.
The unfortunate part is, like, a lot of times with law enforcement is that's where they pull from. They pull from the special assignments, they pull, whether if they have a street team or an SRO, they pull from that. So if you have an SRO program, I'm a big proponent of putting the resources into that, because that could be ultimately where you want to build these relationships, all these different places. It could start right there. And like I said, it can't be the new guy and it can't be the old guy. It's got to be someone that wants to get truly involved. So.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your time with us and our listeners today. And thank you for all the work that you've done and continue to do as you're in this role of officer. And for all of our listeners, for show notes, go to therapistuncut.com. And as always, thank you for helping us make mental health relatable. And we will see you on the next episode of Therapist Uncut.
Thank you for joining Therapist Uncut, a production of AMP Smart Business. To learn more about Therapist Uncut and stay up on upcoming episodes, please subscribe and follow us on social media. As a reminder, although the Therapist Uncut co-hosts are licensed therapists, therapists, they are not your therapists. This podcast is not intended to substitute professional mental health counseling. If you need professional therapy, please contact your local provider or primary care provider. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode of Therapists Uncut.